Hi everyone, this is Sam Gabriel, and today I'm excited to talk to you about Waypoint and what HashiCorp Waypoint is all about. Does it replace CI/CD? And a lot more things to come in this video. We have 4 deployment scenarios that we're going to take a look at in demo format. So excited to talk about all that. And just as a reminder, please comment in the comment section of this video letting me know what kind of videos you'd like to see and watch, and I'll do my best to accommodate. And if you like these videos, do show your support by subscribing and liking the video. And let's get started by actually walking through a presentation to talk about what is Waypoint, what problems does it solve, and then we'll get into the actual demo at the end. All right, so the agenda for today, we're gonna take a look at an introduction that we just go through the Waypoint explanation and where it came from, the why behind it. Then we're gonna look at the Webblog app, kind of do a quick review. I had a series of videos on that where we went through the different HashiCorp tools as I was learning them, and looking at a developer and putting myself in the developer's shoes to kind of understand what the point of those tools are. Then we're going to take a look at 4 deployment scenarios where I think just looking at Waypoint, it makes a lot of sense. So a manual deployment with no CI/CD tools altogether. So just a naive approach. And then taking a look at Waypoint, see what Waypoint came and solved. Just again at a manual level, no CI/CD tools involved. Then we'll take a look at GitLab and without Waypoint. So how did we do things? And GitLab is an example of a pipeline tool. So you could use Jenkins, you could be using GitHub Actions, but it's just an example to show you how we've been doing this before Waypoint. And then finally, the last scenario is incorporating a CI/CD tool such as GitLab with Waypoint and seeing how this is the optimal solution that we can land at this point in time. And finally, we'll conclude our session together. All right, so let's take a look at the application lifecycle and what we know today. So basically, we have these 7 stages in the lifecycle of an application, beginning with the write stage, the test stage for developers, then you build, deploy, release, and finally operate and monitor. And if you notice, the developer concerns and responsibilities are greater on the left side, and they diminish as we move towards the right side, as operations team's responsibility takes over here. All right, so let's take each step at a time briefly to kind of walk through that and what it looks like. So the write stage is basically looking at the source code, right? When you're a developer, you're writing your source code, you choose your IDE of choice, could be VS Code, Vim, Emacs, and so on. So you need to write the code, right? The next step is to test that code. And at this point, you want to integrate with a CI/CD tool, especially with the CI side, continuous integration. So you integrate with CI/CD system to automate a number of tests that you have, unit tests, regression tests, and so on, and have this run on every commit. So examples here, you commit to GitHub, and then you can run tests in Circle CI or even GitLab and so on, or GitHub Actions will take over and so on. Then the build stage, this is where you want to transform the source code that you wrote into something that's runnable, a runnable artifact, and put that somewhere in a registry of some sorts to keep track of it. So examples of that would look at Docker, for example, creating Docker images and storing those in Docker Hub or in a private registry. Then the deploy phase, that's when you want to map the artifact into a runtime of some sorts. So in this example, we can take the Docker image, we can create a new Docker container and push that out to a Kubernetes cluster, for example. This could be maybe a Packer image that got created or creates an AMI in AWS and then launches an EC2 instance, for example, and so on. Then the release phase, this really looks at updates to the application. So how do you cut traffic over from one version of the app to another? So moving from version 1 to version 2, for example. We take a look at blue-green or canary deployments at this stage. The operate phase, that's concerned with the platforms and how the ops teams would look at the infrastructure itself. In this category, would look at Terraform, Vault, Nomad, Consul, Kubernetes, OpenShift, and so on, right? So operating the platform. And then finally, the monitoring phase. This is to look at, measure and observe, look at the metrics, look at the telemetry. Some tools here, Splunk for logs, Prometheus and Grafana for telemetry. You have maybe your application performance management tools, APMs, and tracing as well. All right, this kind of gives us an overview of the different stages of an application's lifecycle, where the developer focuses, usually on the left-hand side here. So writing the code, testing, and then the build, deploy, release. These are the three stages that Waypoint really addresses. And there's a gap here where it's difficult for the developer to figure out where they want to deploy and how they want to deploy, into what environment, and so on. So these are the things that Waypoint is addressing. So let's take a look at an overview of Waypoint. Here we got a developer, and this developer is writing the source code. And then you have a Waypoint manifest. It's an HCL file similar to Terraform's HCL file, where you declare what you want to do. So how are you going to build your artifacts, where are you going to deploy those artifacts, and so on. Once that's done, all the developer needs to do is run the command waypoint up, and the source code gets packaged, gets built, gets deployed, gets released into a platform that you specify in the manifest. For example, maybe you want to release to Kubernetes. So you say, I want to release to Kubernetes, I want to deploy on Kubernetes, and Waypoint takes care of that for you. You don't have to worry about it. So in essence, the first point here is that we have the Waypoint solution abstracts the underlying deployment platform from the developer. Developers don't really care where their application gets deployed. They just want to focus on the code, writing the code, updating the code, and pushing it, and it appears somewhere on some platform. The second point to look at here, or that Waypoint looks at, is integrating with existing GitOps or ChatOps frameworks using plugins. Similar to Terraform's provider model, Waypoint adopts plugins model as well. So same idea, plugins such as Nomad, Kubernetes, Lambda, or Docker for deploying straight on Docker, for example. Plugins into GitOps tools, ChatOps tools as well. That's the idea. And finally, the last point here is to create confidence in for the developer in what they deployed. And Waypoint does that via Waypoint logs and Waypoint exec commands. And these commands give you the ability, just like you do Docker logs or kubectl logs, but these are specific to specific platforms, right? Nomad has their own way of looking at logs for different allocations. At this point, as a developer, I don't care about the platform, so all I want to do is run Waypoint logs, and I can see right away what the application is telling me through the logs that I just wrote. And as well, if I need to exec into the application wherever it's deployed, Waypoint exec does that for us. All right, quick overview of the Webblog app that we're going to use to deploy. As I mentioned earlier, I've done this I created a series of 4 videos talking about this app. So I'll definitely put some links in the description to take you there if you haven't seen it before. But basically, this is deployed in GCP, Google Cloud Platform, and we have a region, we have GKE, so we're running Kubernetes here. We got a zone, and then I have Consul running. This is going to be used for a service mesh. I have Vault running as well for secrets, to expose secrets or provide secrets to my Python Flask app to be able to talk to the Mongo database. And the Vault server uses the webhook mutating webhook in Kubernetes to inject secrets in a certain volume in the pod to be able to be used by the Python app. And this is all done through a Vault agent sidecar. All right. Now, briefly here, I'm not going to go into the details of the application, how it works, but it's a weblog application to show you, you can write blogs, you can write posts inside of it. And we're using Vault to do a number of things, get dynamic secrets from MongoDB, so they're short-lived and you don't hard code it anywhere. Also, it's encrypting the database tables at rest, and a few other things as well. But for this video, we're concerned about how to deploy, right? This is the point of Waypoint. And the scenarios that I have for us today for the demo, 4 of them, we'll take a look at how this all works in the coming slides. So the first one, I call this scenario 1, manual, no CI/CD tools. So naive approach, I don't have any tools. I just want to see how I can deploy. And the way it works is that I have my dev machine here. I do a commit and a push into a version control system, in this case GitLab. And the process is commit and push, then run Docker build, then run Docker push, then run kubectl apply to the context of for the GKE cluster that I have. That will deploy my Webblog Python app for me. It's, as you can see, it's a very manual process and it'll take time, and we'll see that in the demo. All right, next deployment scenario. Let's see now how we can use Waypoint and how this can improve our process, our workflow. Once again, I got my dev laptop, I commit and push into GitLab, and then in this case, Waypoint is not using any CI/CD tools, so it's a manual process. So commit and push, and then all I need to do is run Waypoint up, and the manifest will take care of everything for me. So Docker build will build the container image. Docker push will send the container image to the registry that lives in GitLab, and then Kubernetes deploy will deploy my application to my cluster. Third scenario. Excuse me. In this scenario, we're going to look at how, in the absence of Waypoint, what did we do for deploying at an organizational level? So if I'm only going to have one developer, sure, they can manually do the commits, the builds, the push, and applies, and so on. But if you want to start automating and you want to have multiple developers working in an organization, you definitely need a CI/CD tool such as GitLab. So how does this work? Well, the dev, again, commits and pushes to GitLab. In this case, GitLab, I'm using it for both a version control system and a CI/CD system. Here you can see the pipeline is taking care of everything for me. So I define this in the configuration file of GitLab to say I need different stages in this pipeline. I need a Docker build, I need a Docker push, and then I finally need a kubectl apply. So once you define this, it becomes very easy. All you need to do is change the code, commit, push, everything gets deployed for you, and you're good to go. However, you need to do this for every single deployment destination that you have. So if I'm deploying into Lambda, for example, and I'm pushing maybe a JavaScript function, then I have to configure my file to be able to do that for GitLab, right? And the same thing if I'm deploying maybe VMs into AWS, I need to do the same thing. So it becomes difficult now when you have multiple deployment destinations to use the CD portion of CI/CD, so the continuous deployment. All right, so scenario 4, this deployment scenario is the optimal one in my opinion, because now it takes care of, or it incorporates both CI/CD with Waypoint. And here you have the dev machine once again. All you need to do is commit and push. GitLab, and the GitLab runner itself will run Waypoint up for you, and then that will take care of the deployment. So now if you're running tests, for example, with a continuous integration piece with GitLab, that will all be taken care of in an automated fashion. But at the same time, Waypoint helps you at the development phase. So in the CD phase, to deploy where you need to. All you need to do is just update your Waypoint HCL file, and you're good to go. All right, so I summarized all of this in what I call the deployment matrix. As you can see the columns here, I'm looking at the dev level simplicity, the org level adoption, and workflow. And the first scenario is the manual no CI/CD tools. From a dev level simplicity, very simple. You're deploying everything on your machine. The only downside is not automated, and it's more commands than you would want to run. From an org level adoption, really doesn't scale. In the workflow, to summarize, commit push, Docker build, Docker push, kubectl, apply, or use Helm, or use customize, or what have you to deploy into Kubernetes. Then the second scenario, or second deployment scenario, is Waypoint with no CI/CD tools. The simplicity from a dev perspective is a lot easier. All you need to do is commit push and then run Waypoint up. But again, from an org level adoption, it becomes still harder to scale at this level. So the workflow, to summarize again, commit, push, Waypoint up. That will take care of the build, the push, and the Kubernetes deploy for you. The third scenario, GitLab CI/CD, no Waypoint. So the way we're used to, the problem here is the dev level simplicity is not really there from a deployment point of view. The org level adoption is good from a scaling point of view. And as summary of the workflow, you commit, you push. The pipeline is an automated way of creating your Docker image, so building the image, pushing the image, and finally deploying into Kubernetes. Finally, the GitLab CI/CD with Waypoint deployment scenario. This we saw how simple it is from a dev perspective. You can deploy really wherever as long as there's a plugin, and it's using a CI/CD tool such as a GitLab, so the org level adoption is there. You can scale. Once again, the workflow is a commit and a push that will automatically trigger a pipeline build, which will run Waypoint up for you on a GitLab runner. Okay, so references for this section, I'll have them all in the description of this video. And one thing to note here is the roadmap. I would recommend that you take a look at that. I actually have it open here. So just a couple of comments before we get into the demo. So some of the things that are mentioned here in the roadmap, configuration and secrets. So config syncing. This will allow you to configure keys and value to sync from an external source such as Consul or Vault. So integration with Consul, Vault, or etcd. Writing config to files instead of using environment variables. That's another improvement. Application restarts on config changes. Access control, so incorporating some RBAC. Service brokering. Application can request services such as databases, queues, and so on. Likely to integrate with Terraform. App promotion, exec improvement. So highly recommend that you would go through these remote runners as well. So highly recommend you go through these. Very excited to see what the HashiCorp Waypoint team releases next and what the community also has to offer as well. Okay, so let's move on and take a look at a demo. All right, let me get my Windows set up here. All right, clear. Just to recap really quickly, we're going to have 4 deployment scenarios. The first one is a manual no CI/CD tools involved. Okay, so let's see what I have here from previously running this. So kubectl get all. Okay, so I have a bunch of things that are running. Let me delete these first. Actually, I'm just going to delete the deployment. And what else needs to be deleted? Let's delete the service. Let's see now what we got. Okay, let's delete this deployment as well. So it's the front end. Okay, now let's see, this should be good to go. And I'll explain what we're doing right now. We're in the Webblog namespace inside of the context, the GKE context for the Kubernetes cluster. And in here, we have a MongoDB pod. This has been deployed from before, so this could be external database or a database that's sitting here in Kubernetes, as you can see. So I'm not really concerned about the deployment of the database. I'm concerned about the deployment of the application itself that's going to talk to the database. Okay, so we have the environment ready to go to be able to do our first deployment. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I have the commands on the left-hand side here to keep it handy for me. And the first thing I want to do is just show you the difference in the deployments. So we're going to make a change in the file here. And let's see. So if I go back to the first one. So in here in the header 1 tag, you're going to see scenario 1 manual. So let's save that. And let's go back here. Make sure that there's a change that's going to happen. And let's go to back to my README file. Okay. There we go. So there's a change here. So scenario 1 run, that's my commit. And go ahead and use VS Code to do that. Commit that. And really the commit and the push here is just for me to keep track of my code, right? It's not going to automatically trigger anything. This is just me pushing into the version control system. So that takes care of these two commands, commit, push. Now all I need to do is run a Docker build. So go in here, copy that. So again, I'm doing everything manually. I'm running the Docker build command. Let's see why it's complaining here. Oh, I didn't copy the entire thing. All right. Okay. So this is going to build my image, and I'm using the local Windows Docker desktop to run this. So this is running Docker on my local desktop. So that's good. Now let's go ahead and push this. So I'm pushing this over to the registry. And again, this registry lives in GitLab. And I'm just going to get this ready. The next kubectl is going to be a kubectl apply. And I have the actual Kubernetes manifest right here. And all it's doing, I can show you really quickly. It's creating a service account. It's creating a service, and it's creating an ingress, also a deployment. And in the deployment, if you remember from the previous videos, we have annotations in place. So we have an annotation for let's make it visible. We have an annotations for Consul Connect, so that we can use the service mesh from Consul to talk to the database. Also, we have annotations for Vault to automatically retrieve secrets from Vault injected into the volume. And we're injecting into this particular file. And you can see the database user and password. So securely injecting this through Vault, and that's it. Okay, so let's go back and run this. All right, and that's it. That should deploy our application. Let's take a look at everything and see how long it's going to take to deploy here. So here's my pod. It's almost ready. I'll just give it a couple of seconds here to come up. and then we'll come over and take a look. While that runs, actually, the next step, so we just tee this up, is the waypoint with no CI/CD tools, right? So here, all I'm gonna do is commit and push. Again, this is just to use version control, and then all I'm gonna do from a build and deploy is the waypoint up command. All right, so actually this is done. Let's go over to my application here. Let's refresh this. Actually, I'm not sure if it's using the same load balancer. Okay. Yeah, so I've been having issues actually with Ingress for some reason. It's been giving me these errors, and it resolves itself in about a minute or so. But I'm not gonna sit here and wait. So what we can do is we can just do a port forward and take a look at the service itself. All right, let's see, kubectl port forward. Let's go on port 8080 to port 80. Okay, let's see if it's back. If not, okay, localhost 8080. There we go. Our fancy blog is up and running. Everything is good. You can go in, you can log in and so on, but I'm not going to go through this. All I wanted to show you is that this is the first scenario of deployment. It's a manual scenario. All is good. You saw the process, of just going manually through the commands. Now let's move on to the next scenario. And in this scenario, we are going to use Waypoint. Okay, so for this one, let's see, I wanted to change the app. Yeah, so it's right here. And let's call this scenario 2. What did I call it? Scenario 2 manual with Waypoint. Okay, so we'll save that. Let's close this. Let's commit that. All right, so let's go ahead and commit that and also push it. Okay, perfect. So that gets pushed. And finally, we are going to run the waypoint up command. And here it comes. Wait for it. And there we go. All right, well, this goes through the 3 phases that we talked about earlier, the build phase, deploy phase, release phase. Let's go ahead and take a look at the manifest, the Waypoint HCL manifest. What does that look like? Okay, so it's an HCL file. You're familiar with this if you're using Terraform or even Vault or any of the HashiCorp tools. HCL stands for HashiCorp Configuration Language. And here you give the project a name, you give your application a name, you can add some labels. This URL by default auto host name is true. And what that does, it allows you to have an external URL hosted by HashiCorp for different deployments, and it gives you the different versions of the deployments. I set it here to false because from a privacy perspective, that actually goes onto the HashiCorp servers, so you have to be aware of that. In this case, I don't really care about it that much, but again, feel free to experiment with it, let it go as true, and see what happens. The build phase That's the first phase. I'm using Docker, and I also tell it to use the registry. And when I say Docker, it's actually using my local Docker. Again, Docker desktop for Windows on my local machine. The registry here is the GitLab registry, and the tag here is a function, getRefPretty. It creates a reference from the Git ID. You can also use this piece of code here. You can uncomment it. Encoded auth grabs file base64 from this particular file. This is where you can specify the username, password, and email for the private registry that you have here. And what this looks like, if you're interested, let's see, I have a sample example here. So you'll find this in the GitHub repo. And what this looks like is basically a JSON file with a username, a password, and an email. Okay. Let's go back. What happened to my Waypoint file? Okay. So over here, you can see the deploy phase is using Kubernetes, and the probe path for as a liveness probe or readiness probe is /login for my app. The context, that's the context that I have here, which is the exact same context that you have here. The service port, it's listening on port 80. My app is listening on port 80. The namespace, the service account, the annotations that were used inside to use Consul Connect. This is very important, and also to use Vault. Same exact thing that I showed you in the manifest, the deployment manifest for Kubernetes. All this can be specified here. And finally, the release section, saying that we're using Kubernetes, we're using a load balancer, using port 80, and namespace is Webblog. All right, let's see what happened here, how this finished. So as I mentioned, building stage is building the Docker file and pushing it to the registry, the GitLab registry. The deploying phase, deployment successful, and it gives you where it deployed it. And then the release phase, and it's released in the same place. And then it actually waits to for the service to be ready. Meaning that if you're familiar with Kubernetes, the calling on a load balancer takes a little bit of time until Google calls and creates a load balancer for you to be used, right? And this is the deployment URL as well that I talked about earlier. It's not going to take me anywhere because I disabled it. But this, if I release this, you can see version 6 will come back with version 7. It's kind of neat because you can go back in time and see what the app looked like at different points in time. But again, this is the release URL that we can go and take a look at our app. So let's do that right now. And there we go. Scenario 2, manual waypoint. And we have our application up and running again using Waypoint. Perfect. Now let's go move on to the next section. Let's clear this up. All right, the scenario number 3 that we have here is GitLab CI/CD, no waypoint. So we're not going to use waypoint at this point. So let's go ahead and actually remove the deployment that we just deployed. So it's right here. And also get rid of the service. Okay, one more check. Okay, everything looks good. Now let's go ahead and make sure that our file, and I'll talk about this as it deploys, but this is scenario 3. This is the GitLab CI YAML file that gets used to build this different stages, right? So this is important to go through, and I will in just a minute. But for now, let's go ahead and commit and push, right? So first commit and push, call it scenario 3 run. Commit that. And we're going to go ahead and push it. Okay. So once that's done, what will happen here, if I have my pipelines ready in GitLab, right away the pipeline gets created, right? Or the different stages of the pipeline are have started already. And if we go and take a look at the first stage, the build stage, you can see already that it's there's a bunch of commands I ran here. Who am I? Just to see what GitLab is seeing on the runner. The runner, by the way, is my local machine, which you can do. You can specify a remote runner. You can specify a shared runner by GitLab. But I'm using my local machine to keep things easy. So you can see it's logging into Docker. It's building the container. It's grabbing different variables from within GitLab. The commit SHA from Git, and so on. So it's pushing the Docker container, and the job actually succeeded. It's done. If we go back to the pipeline, just take a look at the second stage. That is also complete. Just quickly to show you what that looks like. Here you can see really what it's doing. It's changing my context. I use kubectx, very handy tool to change context. This is a quick and dirty way of seeding in the version in the deployment to use the Git version. Right? You can always use latest, but then latest you lose the rollback capabilities. So that's why I like to have an actual unique identifier inside the deployment. And then kubectl apply, and it applies this. You can argue you can probably, and you should actually, if you're going to use Kubernetes, if you're going to use this way of doing things, is to use Helm to package the application and use it in your CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so that is complete. We could go over this file, but you basically saw the gist of it. You build this different stages. You have a build stage and a deploy stage. And you have different variables that we saw earlier, the actual registry image, and you put that in your different builds, right? In the different stages, stage build and a deploy build. And the deploy build, that's where the Kubernetes piece comes into play. You can put a tag in here so that you can say where you want the runner to run or which runner you use. Okay, so let's go back and look at our deployment. Okay, so let's see if this is going to cooperate, or if I have to go at the service, look at the service again. Yeah, it doesn't look like it, so let's go back, and instead of using the ingress, once again look at the service. Just port forward the service. So kubectl port forward 8080 to 80. Okay, come back here, localhost. Not sure if I actually changed this to scenario 3 or not. I don't think I did. That's probably why it's still showing as scenario 2 manual. Let's go back and double check just to make sure that that is the case. Yeah, I didn't change it, but you get the idea. I mean, this would have showed the difference, and now that we're deployed using the CI/CD tool. But that's fine. Let's continue on. So before I forget here, let's change this to scenario 4. GitLab CI/CD, no waypoint, right? That's the last scenario in my favorite scenario, right? Okay, let's save this, make sure it's saved. Go back here. Let's go to my README. And okay, let's commit. Actually, before we push, I almost forgot, we need to change to a different GitLab CI file called scenario 3, so that doesn't get created. And then scenario 4, this one is the actual one that we want. So let's commit this again and then push that. It's called scenario around 4 for real this time. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and push this. And then while that gets pushed, let's take a quick look at what this file looks like. So a simple file here to show you how you can use Waypoint with a CI/CD tool such as GitLab. In this case, we're defining Waypoint as a stage. All we're doing is specifying the image. This image could be a variable. You could just hard code it, as you can see here. Then the build stage is simple. You're using Docker and Docker as the image. In here, we're using. I'm sorry. The image is an image created by GitLab for Waypoint, so it will have Waypoint installed in it. And then the variables, some variables they have here, the server address, server token, and so on, that can be specified. But basically, all that this is doing is these two commands: Waypoint init and Waypoint up. I didn't talk much about Waypoint init, but that is necessary when you're first initializing a repo or initializing a folder where Waypoint is going to run. Otherwise, if you try Waypoint up, it's going to tell you we need to initialize, we need to pull the plugins. Again, if you're familiar with Terraform, very, very similar, where Terraform is pulling all the providers. When you run Terraform init, getting everything ready, Waypoint init is doing the same thing. And that's it. So running the script to do Waypoint init, Waypoint up, it's doing that for you through a CI/CD pipeline. And let's take a look at their results here. So see how far the pipeline has gone. Okay, so it's still running. Let's take a look and see what's going on here. Waypoint, that's the build name. Okay, so similar to what we saw earlier, here's what Waypoint init does. We didn't see that earlier, but yeah, you can see the project is initialized. It goes out and pulls different plugins, as you can see. Waypoint up, similar to what we did manually from our machine. This is done through the pipeline. So it's a building the Docker image. Let's see where we at. And then it will push, tagging the Docker image, pushing the Docker image, and then finally it's deploying. As you can see, it's already deployed, and then releasing. So the release stage is where it's calling on a load balancer, and that's why it's waiting for the service to become ready. And then once that's ready, then we can go in and take a look and see what happened. There we go. It is ready now. So copy that, open a new tab. Let's take a look at our shiny application built by Waypoint and GitLab CI/CD. And that's it. And just actually one more thing, just to verify show you that I'm not cheating with the third deployment scenario. Just want to take a look at the Git messages. So if you can see here, scenario 4 run for real, scenario 3 run, right? So it actually did run. I'm not cheating. So we're good to go. Okay, so this wraps things up. Basically, we had a number of things that we talked about today. Waypoint is a new tool that got released recently by HashiCorp, and what it does, as we saw, it's not a replacement to CI/CD. It complements CI/CD and really focuses on the CD part, so the continuous deployment for your applications. You still want to use a CI tool or a CI/CD tool to integrate with Waypoint, so you can get the best of both worlds. And hopefully this deployment matrix and the demo we saw today would shed some light on why Waypoint, what it's addressing, what it's trying to solve in this space. It was hard for me in the beginning as well to understand why another CI/CD tool, what is it exactly going to do. But now that I actually did some hands-on and ran a few things and got the application that I ran earlier working through Waypoint, I'm very happy with the results, and I think I'm going to be using Waypoint moving forward. It really makes life a lot easier for developers. So hopefully this has been a helpful video, and thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.